Hello everybody watching this. You've probably never seen me before because I only have two videos. Here's number 3. Welcome. Today, it's the morning actually, so you might hear some morning sounds like birds, that type of thing. But it's the morning, so I'm gonna have some French press coffee. Just enough for one. Just enough for me today. And I'm going to talk about some non-fiction books that I really like. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to start this video with some coffee. Now, this isn't anything too spectacular. It's just Pete's coffee. Actually, you know what? Let me get it. I'm gonna get it for you. Okay, I'm back with the coffee. This is it. You see, it's Pete's coffee. Dark roast, Italian roast. What that means, I don't know. But I like this. Really, because my mom likes this, and I'm a creature of habit, so now I drink it. Oh, it's in a really crispy bag, you know what I mean? And I think it's great sounding. Pete's coffee, everybody. Give it up. Okay. Now to enjoy myself some. I'm having it in my favorite cup of all time. Check that out. We've got a little snowy scenery. Maybe it's on campus somewhere. And we've got Pepe, who's just, a protagonist in his own world. Favorite cup. Check him out. Life feels like this sometimes, doesn't it? But not today. Okay. Let's pour the coffee. Perfect amount, just for, I don't want to tip it too far, but you know what I mean, just for me. Sorry if you don't like that sound. What I'm going to do is edit this and turn that way down and maybe soften it with a filter. Okay, I've now got a pretty hot cup of coffee. It's steaming in my view, but I don't know if you can see it. I think you kind of can. I don't know, but it's great stuff. Oh yeah, that's very hot. Okay. Now, I want to talk about non-fiction books. It's my favorite genre of books. I read it a lot. I just find it very engaging, and I've read a lot of books over the past 4 years. I guess a lot is probably not that many. I see people on Goodreads who are reading some 50 books a year, and I don't know how they're doing it. I guess for me a lot is I'll read one book every 2 months, if I'm being honest. But I really like to absorb them, and sometimes I like to reread them. So there's one in here I've read several times that I'm going to talk about, but let me put them in a nice stack. So that you can see them. I picked 4 off of my shelf that I've read in the past year and a half that I really like and I would recommend to people. Okay, this is them. Big stack here. Let's talk about them. The first book that I really like that I've read recently is called Emotional. How Feelings Shape Our Thinking. Now, when I first saw this book, I had low expectations because how feelings shape our thinking. I thought this book was going to be kind of a generic self-help book about how to not be emotional or what being emotional means. That's not the case. Why this book is so fun to read and so interesting is because he talks about the science behind our emotions. Why maybe we feel certain things, and it's packed full of information about our nervous system specifically, and about maybe our evolutionary origins. Really, the sentence here, how feeling shapes our thinking, that's really the flag in the ground of this book, is that feelings, emotions are not separate from thoughts, right? This is a school of thinking. This is kind of a new way that researchers have come to understand the way we function. That it's not 2 separate systems, but in fact, emotions facilitate thoughts and are very useful for having certain kinds of thoughts and even certain types of cognition, or maybe even dependent on feeling states. So, really interesting stuff. Also talks a bit about the mind-body connection, or the brain-gut connection. I've heard a lot about that recently too. You know, how the gut and the bacteria in the gut influence mood. He talks about that in here. Really interesting. But yeah, emotional. It's not really self-help, but if you read it like that, I'm sure there's things that you could get from this. But either way, just a really fun read. This was very easy to read as well. He does follow a kind of typical self-help format though, and that's like, if you pick up a self-help book, every chapter usually starts with a personal story that illustrates what will be elaborated on through that chapter. And he does that here, but the stories really work and are really interesting. Yeah, I recommend Emotional, How Feelings Shape Our Thinking by Leonard Mlodinow. Maybe that's how you say his name. Leonard Mlodinow. Okay. Book number 1. We're gonna have a coffee break. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Book number 2. This is the book I've read several times. It's pretty small, but pretty dense. It is called Infinite Distraction by Dominic Petman. It's about the way our attention is grabbed and, I guess, dispersed by technology and by digital technology in particular. So that is an idea that on a superficial level many people share and think about and talk about. The fact that the world right now is set up such that content is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and we all kind of collectively, or a lot of us collectively, feel that that's had an impact on our ability to focus and our attention spans. And we know what watching that content, that really fast, shiny, quick content does to our dopamine levels. And maybe that's partly responsible for a feeling of lethargy, lack of motivation after we binge watch hours of TikToks. Right, so that's an idea that's kind of been around. But this book goes a little bit deeper on that subject matter. Okay? The back says, it is often argued that contemporary media homogenize our thoughts and actions without us being fully aware of the restrictions that they impose. But what if the problem is not that we are all synchronized, but rather dispersed into countless different emotional micro-experiences? What if the effect of so-called social media is to calibrate the interactive spectacle so that we never fully feel the same way as other potential allies at the same time? While one person is fuming about economic injustice or climate change denial, another is giggling at a cute cat video, and 2 hours later, vice versa. So, yeah, he uses this term, hypermodulation, to describe the effect that media has on us, that it modulates our feeling states very quickly and very rapidly, and how that causes people to not really be able to stand on firm ground. And not being able to stand on firm ground, not being able to reach a kind of emotional depth, funny enough, kind of goes hand in hand with this book, not being able to emotionally reach a certain depth maybe prevents you from being able to reach depth in your thinking, right? You can't really conceptualize deeply if your feelings are being jostled around like keys on a keychain in front of a cat, I really like this book. He kind of gives new language to things. He talks about cognitive dissonance. I'm flipping through and I'm seeing kind of what I've underlined. Yeah. It's kind of maybe a cathartic read even. It just feels very good to have that happen. It's really about the sharing of unincorporated information, these kind of disparate pieces of information that don't really form a whole system of thought. This book is he does describe that media is not neutral, right? And it can't be neutral. Yeah. He says here also, I made a note in the back. Information, in quotes, is not knowledge. Information, like data, can be wielded politically, so that a culture becomes highly politicized and discordant. Infinite distraction. If you really like those kind of topics, if that's kind of on your mind a lot about like what is happening to us in this ever-changing age of digital technology, infinite distraction is like a nice place to just park for a minute and have a new way of talking about that same subject. Infinite distraction. Okay. Coffee break. Here we go. Yeah, still good, still great. Okay. Third book. This is the one I just read recently. Ta-da! The Origin of Capitalism. Yep. A longer view. Oh. Ellen Meekson's Wood. Ellen Meekson's Wood. The Origin of Capitalism. It's exactly what it says. I had a question once, and it was, where did capitalism come from? Like, why? Just why do we have this? And when I was in college, I thought a lot about, like, do I like capitalism? How do I feel about this? And I ended up, like a lot of my education, kind of opened my eyes to the drawbacks of capitalism, and also it helped me understand maybe my struggle or my family struggle in a completely new way. That was kind of like baby step number 1. I didn't really learn about it in high school, and I went to a religious undergrad at first. I spent 3 years at a Catholic university, and it was not really heavy in the kind of, it wasn't liberal in the humanities. The way they taught it wasn't really liberal. So in college, I just started scratching the surface of these things, and as I got older, and now I'm in my late 20s, I'm unsatisfied with some of my own conclusions and some of the education I received. So I've been picking up books like this to learn, because I thought, where does this system come from? As I learned more and more and more about it, there seems to be like an instability. It has real consequences for people. And I want to take that and develop some system of understanding. So I picked up The Origin of Capitalism. I thought this was a hard read. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be honest with you. I thought this was kind of hard to read. I found a podcast, actually. I typed this title. I typed it into Spotify, and I found a podcast. I cannot remember the name right now, but I'll type it in text on the screen so you can see. And I found these 2 guys who talked about this book, and I thought their podcast was so helpful about it. They were saying it's an easy read, but I thought maybe they received like a proper education, or they just seem to like read a ton of books. If you look at their whole podcast, they're always reading books, like theory, talking about it, and I thought that's because they flex that muscle. For me, I would reread a page over and over, and then I would turn to my girlfriend and I'd be like, what is this saying? What is this? But I will tell you, the struggle through this book was worth it. this is like what I wished my education in undergrad would have been like. This is what I wished it would have been like. It challenged me. It gave me a completely new understanding of something that I've taken for granted, because capitalism, what is it? We live in it, right? At least in America. From an American perspective, I live in it, right? So why question what it is? Well, actually, it turns out it's not a boring, dusty old topic. It's actually really interesting, and it has a really interesting history. Spoiler for the origin of capitalism. It originated in England. It's British. Spoilers. Sorry about it, but that's what it is. Read the book. It's great. The Origin of Capitalism. Turns out it's British. And it comes from the countryside. It comes from the change between landlords and tenants, and the move to market-based rents. So you think about landlords, in feudal England had a lot of power, and they had like militaries, think about it like the mayor of a town might have a little army, and the peasants are forced to work, and then the landlord gets to collect part of that, some sheep here, some cabbages here, and gets to live pretty nicely. Well, England, when they took a lot of that landlord power away to consolidate it in the monarchy, in the state, those landlords couldn't force peasants to work anymore. So what do? You make them compete for rent. You start changing the way you charge rent such that the peasants have to kind of compete against each other and boost their productivity to afford rent. Capitalism. I had no idea. I literally thought, I don't know where I thought capitalism came from. I never bothered to really investigate that. This book really, really changed my thinking, and I appreciate it so much. Now, she's not scared to talk about kind of the horrors of capitalist exploitation, and at the very end blatantly says, I'm actually going to read you that last sentence because it's really good. Okay, her last few words on this topic. Alright, another spoiler alert, watch out. She says, as capitalism spreads more widely and penetrates more deeply into every aspect of social life and the natural environment, its contradictions are increasingly escaping all our efforts to control them. The hope of achieving a humane, truly democratic, and ecologically sustainable capitalism is becoming transparently unrealistic. But although that alternative is unavailable, there remains the real alternative of socialism. Okay, so she's not squirming away from really laying down what she believes, and that is that socialism is really going to be the way out of these contradictions. I love this book so much. It is great. That's something else as well, socialism. I've been reading a lot about, and I'm very interested in, because I think right now there is kind of the spirit, especially of social democracy, social democrats, and it is seen as this answer to capitalism, and I think I want to investigate that further because it seems like a resting place, especially for a lot of younger people like myself who have become disillusioned by the way things are, and you kind of rest your mind on socialism, right? But, just like capitalism, I took that for granted for so long and never investigated that. Same thing with socialism. I really want to investigate that more. But okay, that is book number 3. I really hope you pick up that at some point. It's just great. It's really great. Pepe. I'm really enjoying this coffee. It's just the best. I don't really put any cream or sugar in it. I just drink it black. I really enjoy sugary coffee. I save that for like if I'm out. I'll get my nastiest sugariest drink that I get is the brown shaken espresso from Starbucks. I'm obsessed with that drink. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm gonna go to filthy old Starbucks and I'm gonna get like some sugar bomb and drink that. But at home, I just drink the black coffee. I really like it. Okay, let's talk about book number 4. Book number 4. This is a weird one. This is a really weird one. And I saved it for last because it is so strange. But amazing, alright? Okay. So good. It's called Staying with the Trouble by Donna Haraway. Its subtitle is Making Kin in the Cthulhu Scene. What? What does that mean? I'm gonna tell you. Okay. If you don't know who Donna Haraway is, Google her. It's worth it. She is so strange and fun. I mean, look at the cover of this thing. What the heck is this? There's like a pelvis. Is that a foot? Is that a foot? What is that? Butterfly. What is going on here? Staying with the trouble. Okay. I am gonna read the back of this to you because it's worth it, and I think it really kind of nails what she's talking about. Okay, are you ready? In the midst of spiraling ecological devastation, multi-species feminist theorist Donna J. Haraway offers provocative new ways to reconfigure our relations to the earth and all its inhabitants. She eschews, there's a word in here, I don't know, referring to our current epoch as the Anthropocene, preferring to conceptualize it as what she calls the Cthulhucene, as it more aptly and fully describes our epoch as one in which the human and non-human are inextricably linked in tectacular practices. Okay, so I think it's really important to know about her, about this book, is that she has her own vocabulary. She has, and she tells you exactly her vocabulary. She says, I'm going to use this word, and I'm going to use this word, and I'm going to use this word. And she'll say, and they mean a bunch of things. They mean all these things at once. I would say she, so in her vocabulary, there's a fluidness that she's pretty open about, and that I really like. To me, she's kind of my answer. She's kind of like my answer when I'm not sure where to park between theory and art, because theory can be so sterile, but not hers. Not hers at all. She really paints this picture of the world and life where we are all interconnected, and that when you make theory, when you do theory, you think about the world and conceptualize your place in it, that it is useful to turn to the natural world, to take lessons from the natural world, to learn from the natural world, and to live in that way more in harmony with our planet and even ourselves, who we are as organic beings. I really like this book. That phrase there, descriptor, a multi-species feminist theorist. It's pretty true. She's got another book, I think like Simians and Cyborgs. She's got another book that really focuses on women. This book is really more emphasis on the multi-species part of that. And it's really good. She's got a whole chapter in here on pigeons. A whole chapter on pigeons and how smart they are and how amazing they are. And how our flourishing as a species is connected to something as humble as like the pigeon. And kind of rethinking this animal. We see this bird on the street of our cities as an incredible animal. Yeah, an incredible animal that we are entangled with. A big word, if you pick up this book, read it, a big word you're going to find is kin and kinship, that we as human beings are in kinship with everything else, every other being. And I think not only is that true, but she presents it in a way that's really fun to read and really interesting. Oh my goodness. The one interesting hang up about this book I feel is never resolved. This is my personal opinion, right? Is that word Cthulhucene. I think the word Anthropocene has become a little more common. Cthulhucene is her personal word to describe this era of time. And she, if you're familiar with that first word, Cthulhu, you might be thinking of H.P. Lovecraft, just like I was when I read this book, H.P. Lovecraft. She makes it known that that is not what she's talking about. She wants nothing to do with H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft was, of course, racist, and that shows up in his work. She's trying to get as far away from that as possible. She doesn't want anything to do with that. Her Cthulhu scene, this kind of murky, swampy entanglement of being, is different than H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu. But I'm not so convinced. I've read H.P. Lovecraft, since I was a teenager. I like his work, and my understanding, I find it true that his racism and the way that shows up in his literature is really incompatible with her work, and really opposite goals there, you know what I mean? However, his conception of cosmic horror and Cthulhu the creature and the old ones, I have a hard time finding the difference between that and her view of the Cthulhu scene and oddkin. So old ones, oddkin. Old ones, oddkin. That's just something that in this book, her use of those words, to me, they're still like so loaded with H.P. Lovecraft. And I try to make an effort when I read that to say, okay, she's not talking about that. She's talking about her own thing. But I'm not so convinced that their conceptions of the swampiness and the entangled nature of the universe are so different. Even though I know she makes an effort to get away from that in this book. I think that should be respected. Okay, staying with the trouble. A really fantastic read. The Origin of Capitalism. I thought this was kind of a dense book, but worth it. She's not using a bunch of theory words, I'll say that. She's just using infinite distraction. It just feels good to have it acknowledged that digital media is pretty fracturing and emotional. How feelings shape our thinking. So good. Just so interesting. I learned a lot. I feel like I have a new understanding of myself. Infinite distraction. I have a new understanding of technology. The origin of capitalism. I have a new understanding of the world around me, the society around me, and kind of contemporary American life. And then staying with the trouble, I have a new understanding of the world, and maybe how I want